Greetings out there. It's Jay. I want to welcome you back to the second episode of The Inherited Map. I hope you're able to catch the first one with Dez. And if you haven't, I'll link that back at the end of this clip. But our second episode today, talking to dads, the influence of the men in their lives and how it impacted them and how they dad. Today's is Denny. He's got two kids, one 11-year-old son and a 9-year-old daughter. He's married, and Denny, like my first dad that I interviewed, Des, is a former student of mine. You're going to kind of see that as a recurring theme in this series. I was a college administrator for 22 years, and my former students, I stay in touch with a lot of them, and they helped me realize that I was ready to be a dad. So it's almost like a full circle opportunity. When I met them, they were 18 to 22 years old. Denny is an example. I actually met him when he was 18 years old. And to see them evolve and grow into the men that they've become, very, very fulfilling. And you'll definitely hear from several more of them over the course of this series. My first question to Denny was to come up with 5 words that described his dad, and this is what he had to share.
His is stability, because he owned
Yeah.
grocery stores all his life. Like, not all his life in New York. He owned grocery
Yeah.
stores, and he had the job. He had that same job, and that's how he kind of raised us and put us through college. So for him, stability was everything.
So my second question was kind of tied into the immigration and the lack of education that his dad had and how it impacted relatability.
He was there for me, supported me, but at some point kind of didn't really understand like my world and what I was going through. So there was not much past high school that we can really like talk to about and relate. As more independent that I got, not that there was no need for him, but it's just the experiences that I was having, he didn't he didn't have, just because he didn't grow up in America or in New York. Like, sort of those high school pressures and all that stuff. He didn't go through that here and what that meant. The stuff I was going through in college, he didn't have any context for that. And then as I continued to kind of step into my own, into my profession and stuff like that, there was no context for me to, first of all, to explain what I was going through, right? And then also for him to give me or provide any advice, because he just didn't
And no.
he didn't know. And even like what I do today, like he wouldn't be able to explain what I do today other than I work in a college and I help people graduate. So I think in that sense, not that I didn't want to go to him advice, but he didn't have that much advice to share, but he was there, you know. At
The third question I have for him kind of built off of that relatability or not being able to relate with Denny on a really deep level in terms of advice and support. But there was one really key component that came out, and that was this idea of stability. So far, what I really kind of was able to gather in my conversation with Denny was his dad is very much old school. And when we say old school, it's less about words and more about the actions, right? So the support, the showing up was a key behavioral characteristic of his dad. He was always there. So it was less about the words and more about, hey, you know what? Here I am. So when I asked for his first memory, his first real memory of his dad, is what he had to say.
a lot of time that I spent with him was in the grocery store. So my memories with him was me going with him or to him at the store. And it wasn't really at home, but it was just seeing him operate behind the counter and seeing him interact with like different people, and joking with them, knowing who they were, knowing their names, and having laughs with them and kind of transitioning with him as well at home, and how tired he was, and kind of realizing like it was somewhat of an act, right? That it was tiring. It was tiring to do that. And some of it is like you need to just do that to you needed to put on an act just to provide good customer service, right? Some of that was him, but some of that was just like, yeah, he's tired, and when he got home, he just wanted to relax and not really talk to nobody
Yeah.
because that's all he did was at work. And I think for him to be likable, it was it was it was one of the reasons that kept him in business. And kind of, some of that I kind of took with me to say, hey, I gotta I gotta deal with people that I don't really like, just to kind of move things along. And that's,
Yeah.
I mean, I remember, you know, just at some point just being agreeable and just, all right, cool, just roll with it. Let's do that. Let's keep it moving.
You're hopefully hearing this recurring theme of stability, of showing up very old school, right? I asked Denny for a lesson that he was taught by his dad that still seems really useful today. And this is what he had to share.
He always had to show up. He always had to show up. He couldn't take a day off. He still like 7 days a week, and he always had to show up. And I think sometimes even when you're feeling like shit or whatever it is, you just kind of you show up, and that is like the majority of the battle. And I think that for sometimes as many things as people, and you've heard so many excuses. Oh, there's this emergency, there's family emergency, there's like a whole bunch of bullshit that that people tend to feed you or that happens. Like being able to show up is something that I always saw him do, getting up in the morning, getting ready, getting out the door. And even when I spent summers with him as a teenager working at the grocery store, um, I would have to get up with him, and that consistency piece is something that I still have with me.
Mm. So the theme continues, right? That showing up piece. I asked Denny for one of his prominent childhood memory that he had of his dad, and this one I thought it was really, really classic. This is what he had to share.
McDonald's would have these like ridiculous deals, like buy one Big Mac get one free, or Big Macs or things for $1 or whatever it is. Like growing up, they would have every Friday or every other Friday with these ridiculous deals. And I remember that when these things would happen, he would come with just like what seemed like 10 bags of McDonald's for us. And what made him happy was just to kind of see us be so excited to get all this food, right? And to some extent, he still does it with my kids. Like he definitely does not visit without having something for them. And he's just like, hey, I can't go empty-handed. I have to have something with me to give. That's something that it was like this thing. It wouldn't happen all the time, but whenever we saw those deals happening, we kind of knew that at some point we were going to get that 1 or 2 nights that week that we're going to have a shit ton of McDonald's for dinner.
We can debate all we want, but we're not going to, right? That lack of healthiness of fast food. But McDonald's is a staple. It's a staple of so many generations. And I definitely got that when Denny shared that memory because it was something that my own dad did with me. Next question I had for Denny then was, this childhood memory, but maybe kind of talk about one when he was in college. And I'll go ahead and let you hear what he had to say.
So I got to go to Dominican Republic with him. This was like my sophomore year in college. He was already there, and it was spring break, and I joined him there. And it was the first time it was like just him and I there. Every night we got to drink beer together and tell stories. And there was one trip that we took that we got together with his buddies. And I've never met his buddies from Dominican Republic. And it was these colonels and generals that were in the Dominican army. And we went to a beach and an island and all that stuff. And throughout the day, they were just telling stories about my dad and his job in the army and what he did and how he would interact. And my dad's job was like a talker. He was like, they would send him into towns to gain intelligence. And that was his skill, to be social, to get people to talk. and then he would feed intelligence to his troop for arrest to occur. So to hear that and understand that sociability was like, they still talked about how good he was at it and stuff like that. But it was so great because he doesn't really talk about himself at all. So I don't really know too much about his time before he got to New York, before us, other than some of the stories that I gathered from them or my grandmother when she was here. But he doesn't talk too much about his past. So that was really something that still stays with me. And I still hope to have one or two trips with him in the future.
That trip to the Dominican Republic with his dad, first real time that he got to spend just his dad and him. Again, as he shared that his dad didn't really talk about himself that much. Again, that old school mentality. I'm going to be a man of few words, but I'm going to be a strong man of action. And all of Denny's recollections so far were about those actions, the showing up, the stability. I want to see my kids happy, that type of thing. But I really appreciated Denny sharing that and about how learning about who his dad was before he was a dad, learning about what he was in the Dominican Republic, it definitely resonated with him and showed through in what he shared in that response. So I wanted to continue and kind of get some ideas in terms of not so much lessons, but just what were the values that he was taught. And the two values that I initially wanted to ask him on was how what was he taught about fear? What was he taught about fear, and what was he taught about a man's role? And this is what he had to say.
People have the ability to hurt you, and that don't be too flashy, don't make yourself a target. And you can do things that'll make you big and boisterous, and all you're going to do is make yourself a target for someone to plan to hurt you. And I think that comes from his time as being a grocery store owner. He had his timing, he knew the neighborhood and all that stuff, and he really kind of relied on getting along with people for people to let him know when something was out of place or something wasn't right, to kind of alert him to danger. But yeah, just to know people have ability to hurt you, and sometimes it's for no rhyme or reason.
All right. Man's role.
So I think it wasn't about the things that he said, but what he did. So he still jokes with my mom. He's still playful with my mom. He has the ability to cook dinners and to clean the house and all that stuff. And I saw him do that when I was sometimes, even though he was tired, he would still do things around the house, whether it was paint, whether it was to fix something. I kind of saw that you just don't sit down. And to this day, like, I have to know, and I know exactly how everything in my house works and how to clean everything and try to research on how to fix all these things, because ultimately it's my responsibilities. And I will tell you that my wife does not know the Wi-Fi password, wouldn't know how to reset a router, wouldn't know how to change the filter on the HVAC. But it's kind of my job to do all those things.
So I can definitely appreciate honestly both of his responses, but that the whole concept of man's role and the evolution over the years and how that clashes with old school values and an old school mentality. It was really interesting to hear how Denny kind of explained maybe not rigidity, but the deference to maybe some of the traditional gender roles, but then also that flow of support. That flow of support and how it operationalizes in terms of his parenting style. The last value that I wanted to talk to Denny about in terms of his dad and his influence on him surrounded the idea of emotions and how we express them. And this is what he had to say.
This one's hard to answer because it wasn't like we didn't have discussions about emotions. There was a lot of anger when I was young, and even to this day, like I still have to manage my anger and learn how to do that. With emotions, I really never saw him get too up and down or anything. I did see him drink, and I think that was his own way to not let it out or not have it overflow. There was moments where he got drunk, like he would BS, right? In those moments where he did get drunk, but he wasn't one to be so emotional. All it was like, hey, just so you know, I love you. And that was it. So that was it. But it wasn't like there was no conversations about how to try to find different venues to put emotional stress or to manage it or to deal with it or to vent it out. I think I'm still trying to find healthy ways now, finding what best works for me and making sure that I tell my son that I love him and making sure to say, hey, I did get angry at you there, but I wasn't angry at you. I was frustrated at the moment, trying to better verbalize and show him that you can get frustrated and you can apologize to people and you can do those things. But it's not something he was good at.
So again, it kind of ties back into that old school vibe that's been prevalent throughout this entire conversation. And then he said he wasn't very good at it, but he was, right? He wasn't very maybe good at talking about it, but the showing and the expressions were still relevant, and it allowed Denny to learn something about emotions that he has obviously since further developed in terms of his parenting style. The next question I asked him was, hey, thinking about it, how was he? How was he as a dad? Was he a good dad? Was he a great dad? Was he a bad dad?
I thought he was a great dad because he always gave me access to him. If I wanted to see him, I knew he was at the grocery store. He never told me not to go to the grocery store. If I wanted to wake up with him to go to work with him, I was there, right? If I wanted to take the bus instead of going home and go to the grocery store and come home with him, he was there. When I started driving, he gave me access to the car as long as I took him to work, picked him up for work. I always was able to hang out with him. He never mistreated me. He never mistreated me in a way where, when it was not in the space of discipline, right? I thought, yeah, he was a great dad. And I think that you look back the circumstances that he was raising us, right? Being an immigrant in New York, having his own business, trying to figure that out with his family and everything, best he could, right? I wouldn't change anything different. I still am able to see him. I see him on a weekly, several times a week basis. I talk to him, I call him. Yeah, I think he's a great dad.
So it kind of pushes us into this, how do you dad now? And initially, Denny talked about his 11-year-old son, and this is what he had to say.
Well, I think that availability, right? I like taking my kids to school. I like picking them up. Earlier this week, I went to a thing at school where you have to give up your morning or stay late. There's that. And trying to talk about some of the struggles that I have with my anger to say, look, I didn't get angry at you. I got angry at the situation, or there was these three things that are happening at the same time and I couldn't do that thing you wanted me to do right there and then. So
Mm.
right, kind of explaining my thoughts. So I think that the availability, trying to be in his world, whether it's playing video games with him, taking him to movies, taking him to baseball games, like knowing what he likes. I like knowing what he's doing, um and even the things that he's exposed to, like I try to mitigate it to some sense, right? So that it's not
Yeah.
too much too fast.
So just as what happened with my first interview and Des, the conversation shifted a little bit to, hey, what is the difference between being a dad to a son and being a dad to a daughter? Are there differences, and how does that look? And this is what Denny had to share in terms of how he parents his daughter.
My daughter is more active in the sense of like more into sports. So my daughter is more apt to like, let's go outside and let's like kick the soccer ball around. Let's throw like a football, right? Let's like just go outside and dribble some basketball. Right. And even like right now, she's into skateboarding a lot. So I will take her to the skateboard. I'll take her to practice and I'll see how she's doing and progressing and kind of praise her and all that stuff. So there is that ability to connect with her. And when she wants me to see a show with her, kind of like just sitting down and seeing those things and not being like, hey, I'm too tired to do this. It's just like, all right, let's do it. Knowing that it doesn't come as natural with my daughter, just because all those things are so active and I may be tired. These things may happen at like 6:30, 7 o'clock or whatever it is after a full day, right? Um,
Yeah.
you kind of just put that aside and you still do it. Because it doesn't matter if you're like, it does not matter that I'm tired while doing it. It just matters that I'm doing it to some capacity.
So the last question that I asked Denny was, when his kids are 26 and 24, fast forward 15 years from now, what would be his hope in terms of their recollections, in terms of their references and memories of Denny as a dad? And this is what he had to say.
Yeah, I think that it's like support. Like I gave them like I want them to know that I was just there. Like I was there, like an active part, not like a bump on the log or anything like that. That I was just like I was there for them.
Denny has been profoundly influenced by his dad's presence and participation in his life. Something I always knew. I actually had the pleasure of meeting Denny's dad at his college graduation, and there was a language barrier, but listen, some things are universal. The beaming facial expression, the positivity, you could see it in the man's eyes and his brow and his shoulders. He was so proud of his son. He was so proud of his achievement. It was a pleasure to be able to sit down and have this conversation with Denny and get his thoughts. And obviously, hopefully, you heard that Denny, the influence of Denny's dad on him is extremely obvious in terms of the showing up, in terms of the support. And these are resonating values and resonating behaviors that he is going to continue to exhibit. And he definitely has exhibited. So, again, great opportunity to just kind of talk about things and talk about positive things about dads, about fatherhood, about what our roles are, what our responsibilities are, how we are not islands, how we are very much influenced by those before us, either as a good map or as a bad map, both relevant. And I want to thank Denny for sitting down with me and chatting. And I look forward to seeing you at our next episode. And thank you for watching this one.